Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 ELO in chess.com rapid games, and during the games I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. We are against a 1593 rated player, and we're going to be playing the Vienna Gambit. And this opening, no word of a lie, probably boosted my ELO by about 100 200 points over the course of a while, obviously, as I got more to the grips with the opening, but insane effects on my ELO. And my opponent makes a mistake, because you're not supposed to take this pawn. It's funny, because if you play f4 on the second move, being the King's Gambit, black is supposed to take, of course, right? And then you have threats of like Queen h5, black is up a pawn, he can probably hold on to the pawn. The problem with this is that now I go e5, because the only difference is that there's a knight on f6 and a knight on c3, which means not only is this knight a target, but this knight also can't advance into the center, because my knight controls these squares. There's also no queen h5 check, which would otherwise be an issue, because the knight is blocking the queen, and the knight also can't come out this way, because my queen controls those squares. So the only move is knight g8. That is the only move. And I think the computer evaluation is about plus 0.8, 0.9, which I mean, by move 4, that's pretty damn good. I can't do you a whole lot better than that, unless you want me to show you the Scholars Mate for the 6 millionth time. Yeah, my opponent does go knight g8. Some people may be tempted to play queen to e7, to attack the pawn and pin it to the king, but after queen e7, queen e2, the knight still has to go back to g8, and this is an even better version for white. It's like plus 1.9 or something, because knight d5 threats exist at all times, and this bishop can't develop properly. So after knight g8, you can play the move d4, and the computer likes, I think queen h4 check king e2 is what it suggests, which is obviously ridiculous in my opinion. I prefer to play knight to f3. Just to defend e5, and of course you can't play queen to h4 check. I'm probably going to win this pawn back at some point, but in a lot of lines, I'm actually happy to stay down a pawn, because let's say my opponent plays something like d6 here. A big mistake would be taking, because after bishop takes, the f4 pawn is defended, my strong e5 pawn is gone, and black just needs knight f6 castles, and he's out of the woods, and he's up a pawn, and it's really difficult to win this f4 pawn back. My opponent plays bishop b4. Now, I've never seen this, and I assume knight d5 just completely counters it, because the bishop's under attack, the pawn's under attack, so I'm just going to play knight d5. Bishop a5 can maybe even be met with b4, attacking the bishop and forcing it back to b6. Although, do I really want to do that? Maybe I can go c4 and threaten c5, but then, like, pawn c6, I suppose I can take on f4. That seems unnecessarily complicated. If bishop to a5, I think we can just take. My opponent plays the move c5, which looks horrific. Oh yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. I mean, take d4, no? Although I could just ignore the bishop and take on f4. I would love to play d4 and go, oh, you can take me on d4, and then your bishop will hang, but I can't do that because the bishop pins the pawn to my king. I could go for the immediate bishop to c4 and just prepare to castle, and everything else is still on the cards. I think I like the idea of not committing to anything just yet, because I like the fact that my knight is still targeting c7, and d6 is also a bit more difficult to play without the support of the pawn on c7. I've honestly never seen this before. I mean, I could play the move c3 and kick the bishop back to a5, but, I mean, yeah, that would help me to build a strong center, sure, but that just helps my opponent to reroute his bishop, and a5 is a safer square anyway. So I'm going to play bishop c4, and we will find out after the game what the correct approach is for white in this position. But this looks fantastic, because something like knight to e7, for example, I think I can take on c5, and after... Sorry, take on b4, and after c takes b4, play knight to g5. Yeah, here, knight g5. We're threatening the f7 pawn. If my opponent castles, then just queen h5, and that's basically game over. That just looks like game over. Let's do it. And the point is, knight to e7 allows me to play knight to g5 because the queen is cut off from defending that square. Now, if knight to g5, knight d5 is maybe a move to block my attack on f7 and open up an attack against the knight. That isn't the silliest thing in the world. Knight g5, knight d5. I suppose I could take. And if queen h4 check, I can just go king f1. I could just play a move like d4, but I feel like now is the time to strike, so I'm going to go knight g5. This could be a pretty quick victory. So let's see what my opponent does, because castling looks like the most natural move, but queen to h5 looks like game over. Because I'm threatening h7 with my queen and my knight, and I'm threatening f7 with my queen, my knight, and my bishop. And there's nothing that black can do there. There's no checks on my king. His dark-squared bishop is gone. This pawn on b4 and the pawn on f4 are both incredibly vulnerable. And I mean, I could go after the pawns. I could absolutely play a move like d4 here and just try and win the f4 pawn, castle, maybe play queen d2 to target the b4 pawn and play it in a slower manner. But I think this is much stronger. A move like d5 doesn't really work to cut the connection because I can just take en passant and the knight's under attack and f7 is under attack still. And moves like queen to h5 can come at any point. Now, my opponent does go pawn d5 because, say you're playing against like the fried liver, a move like this works, and after the pawn on e4 for white takes on d5, it cuts the bishop's connection. Here, however, our pawn is on e5 and not e4, so we can take en passant, which means the pawn ends up on d6 and not d5, which is important for the fact that it attacks the knight, and it keeps the bishop open. And my opponent plays the move knight to d5, which I think is a good move. If we take queen takes g5, I'm sure we're still winning. We can probably play a move like queen f3 there. But I think knight to f7 makes more sense. Although then queen e7? Oh no, then we just have queen e2. Can we go queen e2 straight away? If bishop e6, we can just take. If queen e2 check, king f8. Maybe still knight f7. But we have our queen out, which is useful. I think this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, let's play it. And my opponent is unable to block on the e7 square because of this d6 pawn. Now, the d6 pawn is very weak, obviously, but it's not very easy for black to actually take it because he doesn't have a dark-squared bishop to target the d6 square like you normally would. And the queen is the only other piece that can easily target the square. This is a light-squared bishop, which obviously can't target it. The knights are a good bit away from being able to apply pressure on d6. This knight needs 3 moves, and this knight needs 2 moves. Just geometrically, that's just how it works. I talk about this pattern between the knight and a square 2 diagonals away from it. It takes forever for the knight to actually target that square. Yeah, my opponent goes knight to e3. Which I kind of had a feeling he might, because it makes sense. You block the e-file up, and if I take like this, then you can take the knight. Except it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, I could have played a move like bishop takes f7 or knight takes f7 here. But you can't take my knight, because I will take on f4 with discovered check, and the queen can't block, and the queen is under attack, so I just win the queen. So my opponent castles, and now I think just queen to queen h5, and we have basically the same thing we had before. Guys, we are what? 13 moves in, and the game is basically over. I don't think I did anything too complicated here. If you find this useful, or are enjoying this, finding it particularly educational, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It's very motivating for me, so that I can keep making more videos for you lot. And yeah, I mean, just the game is over because there's too much pressure on too many things. There's no checking ideas. Taking with the bishop here. Oh no, taking with the bishop is actually genius. I was going to say take with the knight, and then we have like discovered check ideas. But taking with the bishop is actually better, I think. Because if rook takes, queen takes, then I mean, obviously that's winning. King h8. Maybe we have to drop the knight back to f3. Which I don't really want to do. I could play h4, actually. Because if take, then take comes with discovered check and mate after my opponent sacks the bishop. But bishop takes, I'm expecting the move king to h8, and then we have queen to g6. Which is an awesome move, because if you take my bishop, I deliver mate. If you do nothing, I deliver mate on h7, and if you take the knight, I go back to h5, the h6 pawn is removed, my bishop covers the g8 square, and it's mate. So that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. And you can see this d6 there, d6 pawn is still standing. And this is such an interesting position, because there's so much tension between so many different pieces, right? So many pieces are targeting each other. My opponent, unfortunately, doesn't allow me to finish my very nice-looking plans. He takes with the rook. I could take with the queen, but after king to h8, I don't really have an attack. Like I say, I could play the move h4. And then, I suppose queen to g6 is a bit of a threat then. And the queen can't take on d6, because I will deliver mate on e8. So, yeah, no, queen takes f7 actually makes a lot of sense. I was thinking knight takes, we attack the queen, we defend d6, and we threaten knight takes h6 ideas. But I think actually, after king h8, h4, oh my, I've said actually about 6 billion times. But I think this makes the most sense. I'm trying really hard not to say the word. Yeah, just h4, h4. You can't take because of mate. And let's say black plays a normal developing move, like knight to c6. Then queen g6, I think ends the game. Because we're threatening mate on h7. If you go queen g8, then knight f7 check. The queen covers the h7 square, so you actually have to give up the queen for my knight. So if like knight c6, queen g6, if you go king to g8, check here, and this is actually mate because the knight covers f7 and the pawn covers d7. So the d6, sorry, e7. So the d6 pawn could actually win us the game here effectively. This is, yeah, he does actually go knight c6, so that was a hell of a prediction. But yeah, queen g6 just ends the game, I believe. Wait, sorry, let me check. Here, if here, then here. Here, I forgot that the knight actually dies, so f7 is accessible, so the king could go to f7. And then the game actually isn't over. The game isn't quite over then. So, okay, this doesn't quite work. This doesn't quite work. The king kind of escapes. This knight can still cannot be taken, though. It still cannot be taken. What else can we do here? Well, if we move the queen to a square like h5, this would be a threat. But queen h5 doesn't come with any threats. Like, other than knight to f7. And our bishop is kind of locked out of the game here, which is annoying. What can we do? What can we do? I really want to play this. This feels like the right line. Here. We do have g6 check, actually. That's got to be winning somehow. Let me try and calculate this. Queen g6, hg5, hg5 check, king h7, queen h7 check. If king f8, then it probably transposes. Also, the queen is now defended, so a check here wouldn't win the queen. Here, g6 check. King f6. He's just surviving. That's incredible. That's incredible. Ooh, wait. What about queen d5? What about queen d5? That carries the threat of knight f7. If queen d5, if you take and take, this is still mate, because I'm still covering the g8 square with the queen, right? So queen d5, you can't take my knight, and knight to f7 check is a threat. So, how do you defend? Queen... If queen g8... Well, then we get a queen trade, which is still going to be completely winning. So, queen d5, queen f8. Check. If the king goes to g8, then of course we have discovery. So the king has got to go to h7. Check. King can go to g8. And then we kind of run out of threats. Maybe after the queen moves, we... Sorry, not to g8, but f8. Maybe we just play pawn to d7. Trapping the bishop. That doesn't quite feel right, though. Again, I still really want to make this line work, but I can't figure out how to. I can't quite figure it out. Let me think a minute. Let me think. Knight c6 is stubborn. That is stubborn. Take, king g8. What else can we do? What else can we do? Well, rook h7 doesn't do anything. We've got to give this check. I mean, what other choice do we have? Does d7 do anything here? I mean, if queen takes, we have mate, right? So d7... We're also threatening queen to e8 check there, with promotion ideas. So what happens if bishop takes? I don't think we gain anything there. Do we gain anything? Does this start to work somehow? Take here, check here. No, I don't really see how it does anything. I think I'm going to have to go for queen d5. Queen d5, there is knight to d7. But then we have a check here. If the king goes here, we have like double check ideas. That should be fine. Oh no, we can just take and then promote after our queen hangs. Yeah, that's not a problem. Let's do this. I can't find a better move than queen d5. Maybe the computer will tell me after the game that I'm a complete idiot. Maybe some of you in the comment section will tell me during the game that I'm a complete idiot. That is absolutely likely, absolutely possible. But to me, this looks like the simplest approach, because I don't just want to give up my knight for no reason for an attack that looks like it might work. I want to be concrete here. I want to be concrete. So take is obviously mate. So my opponent cannot take my knight. This is a threat. This is kind of a threat. Queen f8. Check. King g8 is off the cards. So king h7. What do we do there? What do we do? Maybe we just go d7. Maybe we just go d7. Queen f6. Why have I not considered this move? check here, check. If the queen blocks, we just trade queens and we win, right? So if, sorry, check here, check here, check here, check. You can't take because you'll have to give up your queen. But that's the only option. I think this wins. I think this wins. And if king g8, there's got to be some kind of win there. Okay, let's deliver this check. I'm pretty sure that after king to h7, queen to e4 check, king g8 loses to queen e8 check, queen g6. Queen g6 actually allows knight g5 check, and if the king moves, we win the queen, and if take, we win the queen. So black also can't do that. So if here, and g6, can we still play this check? I don't think it does anything, because black can just not take. Of course, if he takes, then I take back and I win the queen. But I think we maybe just have h5, although then the knight can be taken. Also, I think I've neglected the fact that bishop to f5 could be played. I think I've just neglected that for some reason. Bishop f5 is absolutely a move here. And that kind of solves black's problems. So I think I have to do this. Well, I could put the knight back on g5, to be fair. Because you still can't take. So no, we'll give this check first. Just because I prefer the knight on this square. It leaves my queen a bit more open. We have more possibilities. I can always put the knight back on f7. Of course, you can't take because I delivered check, and the only way to defend is this. So the king goes back to h8. I think just d7. Yeah, let's just go d7. Maybe I've been overcomplicating this. This just wins the bishop. And if take, rook d8, we have knight to f7 check. And we win the rook. So that's also not an issue. Yeah, maybe I've been overcomplicating this a little bit. I think, to be fair, this e-pawn is actually quite annoying, because if we could remove these two pawns off of the board, then I'd have bishop takes h6 ideas. Or actually, more pressing would be bishop to g5 ideas after the knight moves to like f7, because you, again, wouldn't be able to take because you'd open up my rook. So it does make it a little bit more difficult, because I'm really only attacking with two pieces, but it is common knowledge that the queen and knight are basically the best attacking partnership in chess, because the queen, of course, goes up, down, side, side, and diagonal as much as she wants. And the only piece that moves differently from the queen, other than pawns, is the knight, who can hop and move in L shapes, and it's really annoying to deal with. So the queen and the knight together basically can do everything, which is why they're so powerful as an attacking duo. But yeah, I think d7 is simple, and I probably should have already played it before. I can't really play a move like bishop d2 because of queen b2, and then I'm just creating unnecessary problems for myself. It just means that two of my pieces are kind of out of the game, which makes it a little bit more difficult to convert this. Knight d8 is interesting. Stopping this. Yeah, that is interesting. To be fair, we don't actually have to take the bishop, because the bishop can't go anywhere. I think this would be a mistake because of queen e7 check picking up the pawn. Although we could just take the bishop. We could just take it. Let me think. Yeah, let's just take. There's cool ideas of queen d8, knight f7 check, winning back the queen, but if queen d8, rook d8, then it obviously doesn't work. This knight still can't be taken. So bishop d2 is kind of what I want to play. If rook c2, then we can go for this, and the game is over. If bishop d2, queen b2, can you get away with that? If I castle kingside, then maybe you can take my knight? Maybe? I could consider the move queen to d7, pressuring the rook and threatening this. If here, let's say knight... Well, no, that doesn't defend the rook. So yeah, no, this should be winning. There's still no checks on my king. This still can't be played, because whilst it isn't mate, the queen will hang with discovered check, and queen h6 obviously doesn't help black, because you will still lose the queen. To be fair, considering my opponent got a lost position in about 10 moves, or maybe even less, he's done a pretty good job of defending this and making my life difficult. More than I expected. More than I expected. And we only have 2 minutes 40 left, but we do have 10-second increment, which is the beauty of rapid chess. So that does make my life a little bit easier. Again, we are still kind of only attacking with 2 pieces. And yeah, sure, if one of them gets taken, then I can add a third piece to the attack. But these 2 pieces are, well, kind of 3 of them are kind of not doing anything. But the black king is so weak, and this knight is just untouchable. It's a fantastic knight, because it's cutting off so many important squares, carrying so many threats, and like I said, the queen and the knight together form probably the best attacking duo in all of chess. You could argue, oh, the bishop pair is the best, or a queen and bishop battery, or a queen and rook battery, but a queen and knight can change direction and do different things and pose so many different types of threats than like a queen and bishop or a queen and rook can. So, I mean, okay, yeah, a queen and a queen would probably be better, but let's be realistic here, please. My opponent does take, and this just doesn't work, of course, because we take on g5 with discovered check. If the king moves, we just take the queen. Now, if the king moves, don't give a check like this. Queen f8 doesn't actually save you. If, like, here, you can give a check on h8 to deflect the king over and still win the queen. But it's far easier just to take the queen. And then this is actually a threat of mate, and now it's mate in 4. I hope you guys enjoyed the game. Let's get into some analysis and see where we could have done a little bit better, or maybe it was perfect. Who knows? Okay, so the computer gives us a flat 90% accuracy here, and apparently 1 inaccuracy, which we'll find out what that was. But the opening e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6. Knight c3 is the start of the Vienna, and black doesn't have to go knight f6, but he does. f4 is played, black is not supposed to take this pawn, d5 is the main move, and you get some very tricky lines here. I have a whole playlist dedicated to the Vienna, like every game on my channel which has the Vienna game or Vienna Gambit, which will be linked below alongside the previous episodes of this speedrun series. So check those out if you're interested. But after takes, e5 is just a bit of an issue because the knight has to retreat. Now queen e7 is not good because queen e2, the threat still exists, the knight has to go back. White can just continue to play normally, and threats of knight to d5 exist in all scenarios. Now after queen to h4, the computer wants to play moves like king d1, which I mentioned during the game kind of exist, but personally, I prefer just to put a knight on f3 to avoid those lines entirely. So knight g8, knight f3, bishop b4. Now I had never seen this before, and the computer actually wants bishop c4 And if takes, then d takes, and you open up the queen and the bishop for free. Now, I went knight d5. Okay, well, it's just told me that knight d5 is actually the best move, so I don't really know what to believe now. But c5 is just a horrific move. A horrific move, because it doesn't help black in any way. Knight c6 is apparently better. I would have expected a move more like bishop to e7, just retreating and maybe claiming that my knight would block the diagonal for my bishop. I personally think that would make more sense. Probably knight takes f4, something like d6, bishop c4, and the game goes on. But c5, the computer likes c3 here, and after bishop to a5, d4. C takes, bishop takes, if this, then, okay, well, this is just very convoluted. I prefer my move bishop to c4, to be honest. Knight e7. Knight b4 is the best move, cb4, and knight g5 is the only move that, like, really controls the game for white. Because, let's say you do something lazy like castling here. Then black plays a move like d6 and challenges you in the center. And it's not so easy anymore, because, yeah, you're better, obviously. But now black is starting to get out. Knight g5 keeps black pinned, keeps him completely pinned, because castles loses because of queen to h5. You have to stop mate, so h6 is the only move, and then knight f7 attacks the queen, threatens discovered checks. You have to give the rook up, because if you, say, move the queen, then you're going to get mated anyway. Something like knight g4, and we have similar mating patterns to what we saw in the game. Oh, don't do this to me, computer, please. But my opponent plays d5, which the computer actually thinks is the best move. I thought maybe knight d5 could be played, because if bishop d5, queen g5, and black is still kind of in the game. But I think I was intending the move queen h5 against this. And if g6, which is clearly the only move, because if you castle, you just lose your knight, and my knight is defended. So g6 is clearly the only move. And then queen h6 threatens to get involved on g7. And then, I mean, if you retreat the knight, like, back here, then this is actually just mate. Which is kind of crazy. So the computer just wants to give the knight up. So it's pretty dire. And my opponent chooses pawn d5, which is the better move. ed6, apparently queen d6 is the best move, allowing knight to f7, and just giving up the rook in the corner. Computer wants to cut the losses, but of course, as a human, you want to try and get out of the situation, not just admit that you're lost, but you're going to be a little bit less lost. So knight d5 is played. Again, if I take the knight, then queen takes g5, and the game, it continues. The game is not over. Queen h5 is an issue. If I play a lazy move like d4, okay, that hangs a bishop. So let's say bishop to b3 here. I'm losing after bishop g4, and my queen is trapped. So the game is not over. It's not over, and the computer actually thinks this is the best move, queen e2, so I'm very happy I found it. My point is, bishop e6 can't be considered, because I will just take on e6. And if you take, then I can take here with check, I can take the knight, I'm winning so much. King d7 is the best move. Really? And I mean, yeah, if I take here, then here, and black sort of survives. I can go knight back to f3, I can take on f7, I can play h4. If here, queen h4 check, king d1, rook e8, queen f3. Yeah, there's still a little bit of life in the game, I suppose. I'm only up a pawn, and my king can't castle. The game goes on. My opponent chooses knight e3. And this just doesn't really do anything. Now, I did consider taking on f7, like here, something like king f8, de3, but then I was like, well, my opponent can take on g5, and my bishop's under attack, and I'm winning, sure, but there's still life in the game. D takes e3 kills the life for my opponent, which is, you know, the whole idea. Because you can't take because of take with check. The queen can't block in a way that also protects the queen, because my pawns are so powerful. So you just have to move your king, and then I just take on g5, and the game is over. So my opponent castles. I play queen h5, which is the best move. h6 is played. Bishop f5 is apparently better. And after bishop f7, king h8, knight h7, if here, bishop g6 ends the game. crazy. But my opponent plays the more natural h6. I take on f7 with the bishop, which is an inaccuracy, really. I suppose I miscalculated. Knight f7, I mean, you have to take it, right? And then my thought process was, well, after queen takes, king moves, where's my attack? And I mean, my attack is actually gone. b3, bishop b2 is what the computer wants, which, yeah, that is actually deadly. Surely black has to trade queens there to have a hope of surviving. Like, queen f6. Oh no, that blunders mate. What am I on about? Yeah, this is horrific. I thought bishop takes f7 was better, because if the king moves, then what was my plan? What was my plan? I think my plan was queen g6. Although I just realised that blunders g5. Huh. It's a good job my opponent took. Hopefully I wouldn't have blundered that. But my opponent took. I take on f7 with the queen, king h8. h4 is the best move. You can't take because it's just mate after bishop to h3 and rook takes h3. So knight c6 is a good move. I go queen d5. The computer does like queen g6, but I couldn't figure out what was happening here. Because after queen h7, king f7, g6, the king kind of escapes. And black is probably losing, but, like, I can't see my mate. The computer, however, wants rook h7. And after queen f8 defending, queen h5. Ah, you switch the positions of the rook and the queen so the queen maintains the defense of the f7 square. That's genius. I didn't see that. I didn't see that. I knew there was a quicker win, but I just couldn't find it. Queen d5, though, is still a good move. Still a good move. And the threat is simple. My opponent goes queen f6, knight f7 check, king h7, knight g5 check, king h8. That's kind of, yeah, a lost cause with this whole checking sequence. All I can do is repeat it. And I find d7, which is the best move. Knight d8 is played. If bishop to d7, queen d7, there is no rook to d8 because of knight to f7 check. So my opponent plays knight d8, which covers the f7 square. I mean, black is completely lost, of course, but I could mess this up somehow. Computer likes queen d3. And I mean, take, I still win the queen, and I'm threatening mate. So g6, promote, take, then queen back to d7. And again, if take, I win the queen. And if king g8, then I win the rook. Okay, well, I played a roundabout version of that. I take, queen d7. I guess the difference is the pawn isn't on g6, so there is not a mate threat. My opponent takes on g5, which of course loses the game completely, because after king g8, I just take the queen. But let's say he doesn't do that. What else can he do? Because I'm threatening this, I'm threatening this. This is sometimes a threat. This is kind of a threat. The computer's move is queen c6, defending the rook and defending the mate. And I've got nothing better than to trade queens, apparently. And of course, this position is just over, because I'm up a bishop and a rook. The game is completely done. But if the queens come off the board, then the game is over for black. Because that's black's only source of counterplay, is that my king is a little bit weak. But yeah, my opponent just blunders this and he resigns because there's nothing left to be done. A very nice Vienna game. Very nice. If you haven't tried the Vienna before and want to learn more about it, check out the video appearing over here. And if you want to watch the previous episodes of the speedrun, check the playlist down there. Thank you very much for watching.